A young woman's life was stolen in a brutal attack meant for someone else. Ashley Dale, an innocent victim caught in a deadly web of gang revenge, paid the ultimate price for someone else's crime. Her death wasn't just a tragic mistake. It was the result of a dangerous world where loyalty and vengeance collide. This is her story, and it's a wake-up call for us all. Are you ready to face the truth about the violence hiding in plain sight? Ashley sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone. It was just another quiet night until a deafening crash shattered the silence. The front door burst open. A masked gunman stormed in, his weapon raised. Ashley's heart pounded. Run! Her instincts took over as she sprinted toward the back door. Her bare feet slipped on the hardwood floor, but she pushed forward. Footsteps thundered behind her. He was gaining. A desperate scream caught in her throat as she reached for the handle. Too late. A single gunshot. Pain, darkness, silence. Ashley collapsed, her life stolen in an instant. Moments later, the masked man stood over her lifeless body, gun still smoking. His breathing was ragged. He pulled out his phone, ready to send confirmation, then he froze. This wasn't the woman he was sent to kill. A sickening realization dawned. He had the wrong target. Somewhere, the real target was still alive, completely unaware of the attempt on their life. Ashley was just an innocent girl, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. And now, the killer had a choice. Disappear and leave this mistake behind, or go after the real target and finish the job. One thing was certain. Someone was still marked for death. Ashley Dale was a 28-year-old environmental health officer, passionate about her job and deeply loved by those around her. She had no criminal ties, no dangerous lifestyle, just a bright future ahead. She was hardworking, determined, and full of ambition. Her friends described her as kind and caring, someone who always put others before herself. Her family adored her, and she had big plans for her life. But on one tragic night, everything changed. Ashley wasn't involved in crime. She had no enemies. So why was she killed? The answer? Lee Harrison. Ashley had been in a relationship with Lee, a man caught in the middle of a violent feud. He wasn't a criminal, but he had enemies, dangerous ones. And in their world, grudges didn't just stay between rivals, they spilled over. Ashley had no idea that just by being with Lee, her life was at risk. When a gunman burst into her home, he wasn't looking for her. He was after revenge, but in the chaos, Ashley became the tragic victim of someone else's war. She had no chance to beg, no time to run. One fatal shot ended it all. And the worst part? She wasn't even the intended target. A bright future was stolen that night, all because of a war she had nothing to do with. Liverpool's gang underworld is a ruthless battlefield. Drugs, weapons, and bloodshed rule the streets. Rivalries last for years, and grudges don't fade, they fester. At the center of one of these deadly feuds was Niall Barry and the notorious Hillsiders gang, a group feared for their brutal tactics. They didn't forget, and they never forgave. In 2018, a costly betrayal set everything in motion. Lee Harrison, Ashley Dale's boyfriend, made a dangerous mistake. He stole 40,000 pounds worth of cocaine from Barry. To most, it was just another drug deal gone wrong. But to Barry, it was a declaration of war. The Hillsiders didn't strike immediately. Instead, Barry waited. 4 long years, plotting, watching, and preparing for the perfect moment to exact revenge. Then, in August 2022, the time came. Barry's men tracked Lee down, determined to make him pay. But when they stormed his home, Lee wasn't there. Ashley was. It didn't matter that she was innocent. It didn't matter that she had no ties to the gang world. She was his girlfriend. That was enough. A gunman pulled the trigger. One shot, one life stolen. Ashley Dale wasn't part of this war, but she became its casualty. Glastonbury Festival, one of the UK's most famous music events. Thousands gathered under the summer sky, dancing, drinking, and enjoying the music. But beneath the festival's carefree energy, a storm was brewing. In June 2022, Lee Harrison and Niall Barry crossed paths in the crowded festival grounds. It wasn't just an accidental meeting. It was a moment years in the making. Tensions had been simmering since 2018, when Lee made a dangerous mistake, stealing 40,000 pounds worth of cocaine from Barry. It was a betrayal that couldn't be ignored, one that had left a permanent mark on Barry's ego. Surrounded by music and celebration, the two men locked eyes. The past came rushing back. Harsh words were exchanged, voices rising above the festival crowd. Barry, still seething over Lee's betrayal, wasn't about to let it go. "You think you're untouchable?" Barry snarled. Lee didn't back down. He fired back, taunting Barry, daring him to act. But Barry wasn't a man of empty threats. The confrontation grew heated, turning into a full-blown shouting match. Friends stepped in, pulling them apart before things got physical. But the damage was done. Barry's rage boiled over. This wasn't just an old grudge anymore. It was personal. As Lee walked away, Barry made up his mind. Enough waiting. Enough patience. That night, Barry put out the order. Lee Harrison had to die. And soon, an innocent woman would pay the price. In the weeks leading up to her death, Ashley Dale was terrified. She wasn't involved in the gang world, but she knew danger was closing in. She confided in her closest friends, sharing her fears about the threats surrounding Lee. She spoke of strange cars parked near her home, unsettling messages, and a gut feeling she couldn't shake. "I feel like something bad is going to happen." Her friends listened, concerned but skeptical. Surely this feud wouldn't reach her. She was innocent. Why would anyone target her? But Ashley knew better. She had seen how these rivalries worked. Violence didn't follow rules. Innocence didn't matter. Still, she tried to go on with her life, hoping the worst wouldn't come. She never reported the threats to the police. Maybe she thought it would blow over. Maybe she believed Lee would handle it. But Barry and his gang weren't finished. They wanted blood. On August 21st, 2022, the danger Ashley feared became reality. A masked gunman kicked down her door. There was no time to run, no time to beg. One fatal gunshot. Ashley's warnings had been ignored, her fears dismissed. And now, her life was stolen in a war she had nothing to do with. August 20th, 2022, the night everything changed. Inside a dimly lit safe house, James Witham, the gunman, and his accomplices made their final preparations. Their mission was clear: eliminate Lee Harrison. The plan had been in motion for weeks. Lee had made powerful enemies, and now it was time for revenge. No more waiting, no more warnings. The gang moved quickly. Armed and masked, they drove through the dark streets of Liverpool, heading straight for Ashley Dale's home, where they believed Lee would be. Once there, they put their plan into action. They tampered with Ashley's car alarm, setting it off in the dead of night. It was a classic trap. The noise would force Lee to step outside, exposing him, an easy target. But there was a problem. Lee wasn't home. Inside, Ashley woke up to the sound of the alarm. Confused and half asleep, she went downstairs to check. She had no idea she was walking straight into danger. The hitmen, realizing their primary target was missing, made a ruthless decision. If they couldn't get to Lee, Ashley would have to pay the price. The trap had been set, but Lee Harrison never showed up. Frustrated but determined, James Witham made his next move. If they couldn't kill Lee, they would send a message. Witham stormed toward the house, booting down the door with brutal force. The sound of splintering wood shattered the silence of the night. Ashley Dale, startled awake, had only seconds to react. She saw the masked figure, the gun in his hand, and knew instantly this wasn't a robbery. This was a hit. She ran, through the house, out the back door, desperate to escape, but she never stood a chance. Witham chased her down into the garden, a predator hunting his prey. Ashley pleaded for her life. She wasn't the target. She wasn't part of this war, but it didn't matter. With cold precision, Witham raised his gun and pulled the trigger. One shot, one life stolen. Ashley collapsed, the grass beneath her turning red. The killers didn't stick around. They had done their job. Alone, in the dark, Ashley bled out before help could arrive. An innocent woman caught in a war she had nothing to do with, and now she was its casualty. The phone call came in the early hours of August 21st, 2022. Julie Dunn, Ashley's mother, answered it, unaware that it would bring the most devastating news of her life. "Your daughter's been shot." A cold, empty feeling washed over her. Ashley? Her baby girl? The news hit hard. Ashley was gone, but the heartbreak didn't stop there. Julie had already lost so much. 7 years earlier, in 2015, her son, Lewis Dunn, was murdered in a senseless act of violence. He, too, had been caught in the web of gun crime, a tragedy that left a permanent scar on the family. Now, Julie was forced to bury her second child, both victims of the same horrific violence that plagued their community. 2 children, lost to the same cruel fate, gun violence. For Julie, the grief was unimaginable. The pain of losing one child was unbearable, but to lose 2 in such brutal, senseless ways was a nightmare she couldn't escape. She had always hoped for a peaceful life for her children, a future where they could grow old and happy. Instead, violence had taken everything. A family torn apart by tragedy, and a community left to pick up the pieces. Let's make a stand. How many more lives will it take before we demand real change? In the days following Ashley Dale's murder, the police began piecing together the horrifying truth. Their investigation quickly uncovered the chilling details of the plot behind her death. The hit wasn't meant for Ashley. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The real target was her boyfriend, Lee Harrison, a man caught in the crosshairs of a dangerous gang war. Police discovered that Niall Barry's gang had orchestrated the hit. But when Lee wasn't home, the killers, led by James Witham, made a fatal decision. Instead of aborting the mission, they targeted the next best thing, Ashley. It was a cowardly, senseless act of violence. No justification, no reason other than to send a message. Ashley had no ties to the gang world. She wasn't involved in drugs, weapons, or crime. She was an innocent woman. Yet, in their eyes, her life was expendable. The killers didn't hesitate. They stormed her home, chased her down, and murdered her in cold blood. This wasn't a hit gone wrong. It was a deliberate execution, a tragic, pointless loss of life. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Ashley's death was a tragic consequence of a gang feud that had no regard for who it destroyed. Her life was taken not because of who she was, but because of a war she had nothing to do with. In December 2023, after a long and emotional trial, justice was finally served for Ashley Dale and her family. The truth had come to light, and the 4 men responsible for her brutal murder were held accountable for their actions. James Witham, the gunman who killed Ashley in cold blood, was sentenced to 43 years in prison. The driver, Joseph Peers, who helped flee the scene, was handed 41 years. The man who masterminded the attack, Niall Barry, the feared leader of the Hillsiders gang, was sentenced to 47 years. Sean Zeiss, another accomplice who aided in the execution, received 42 years. While these sentences ensured that the killers would spend decades behind bars, the pain for Ashley's family remained. No sentence could ever bring her back. The justice served was not a victory. It was a reminder of a life stolen too soon, a young woman with a bright future, taken away because of a senseless gang feud. Ashley's family, already shattered by the murder of her brother Lewis, had now lost their daughter too. The sentences couldn't undo the devastation, but at least, for the first time, they could begin to heal, knowing that the men responsible for their grief would never walk free again. Ashley Dale's tragic death should never be forgotten. It's a reminder of the innocent lives lost to gang violence, lives that didn't have to be taken. Her story, and the senseless loss of her life, should fuel a call to action. We can no longer stay silent. We must raise awareness of the impact of gang violence and the devastating consequences it has on families, communities, and society as a whole. We need to push for tougher laws against illegal firearms and gang activity. There are too many lives at risk, too many families torn apart by violence that could have been prevented. If you see something, say something. Don't stay silent when you know something dangerous is happening in your community. Your voice can make a difference in stopping the next tragedy before it happens. Ashley Dale's story isn't just hers. It's the story of so many innocent victims. We owe it to them to fight for a future where violence like this is no longer tolerated, where families don't have to suffer such heartache.